Okay, hello everyone, good morning. Welcome to this conference. Thank you all for coming early on a Saturday morning. We began these conferences in 2005 and we've been having it every year since then, except for 2020 because of COVID and 2022 because of the elections at that month we couldn't have. But otherwise, every year we've been having these conferences. And we think it's important for all left groups, including the PSM, to be clear about what the situation is, to understand the reality in our country, in our neighborhood, so that we can make plans. So it's important to have this discussion. But, I think it's important for the left to also always question, why is it, despite the fact that it's so clear that neoliberal capitalism is making a mess of the world and a mess of the environment, why is it the left is not able to mobilize the masses to bring us into power? I mean, just recently we saw was it Netherlands? They have a right-wing xenophobe taking over. So what's wrong? What's wrong? Why aren't people coming to us? I mean, we think we got all the right ideas, right? But how come not many others seem to think so? And I think that's important, as we go through this thing and have our discussions. I think we can say, yes, there's been repression in Malaysia and other countries. Yeah, we can say, we lost the propaganda war, and we've been, like in Malaysia, we are said to be, cruel. The left is cruel, the left is violent, the left is atheist, and that puts a lot of people away. And there's a legacy of ethnic politicking in Malaysia, But are we doing something wrong? I think it's important to ask ourselves that, And I want to just give you a few questions to just bear in mind, not only for this conference, but later on, Is our messaging correct? Are we putting things across in a way which is people can latch to and understand? I mean, are we too interested in being revolutionary and having the correct line and having a pure position, as opposed to showing people we have relevant solutions, realistic solutions to there's a difference, In our conference among the left, we can try and be rigorous and use our jargon and come to a clear understanding. When you go to the masses, use the same kind of words and the same kind of arguments, we leave them, what is guys talking about? I mean, so are we making that mistake? I think that of PSM as well as other parties as well. Do we have a clear roadmap for our countries? Each country will have to have a slightly different roadmap. There's no point saying we must have a progressive alliance of all the races, the peasants and the workers. Yeah, that's what we must have, but how do we get there? In a situation where we are divided so much by race and by religion and with false consciousness, how do we get to that position where you have a progressive alliance, mass alliance of all the races? Yeah, we know you're going to get there. But just saying that, without having a roadmap to get there, and the Malaysian context we're going to talk about, there's persistent Malay poverty. Despite the fact that NEP has been there for the last 60 years, there is still significant Malay poverty. The median wage among Malay workers is lower than the median wage among the other workers. And there's a huge section of Malays who are in the informal sector with even lower income. But it's the non-Malays also have a grouse that the ethnic quota system has. So they also have a legitimate grouse. How do we navigate that and bring these two groups together? These are the things that we got to see. That's the part of the roadmap for Malaysia. How do you overcome the ethnic divide? So we must have clear ideas. No point talking about what should be happening at the penultimate stage without talking about how do you start. So our messaging must include that. And the question is, how do you win people, Do you win people over by ideological discussions? Or do you win people over by mobilizing them on issues that, like Rosa Luxemburg talked about the mass strike. She's always saying, get the workers to go on a mass strike. It is action, it is mobilization that actually changes consciousness. Not our pamphlets, not our papers, not our discussions here. That doesn't change people's consciousness. When people move on issues that matter to them, whether it be minimum wage or pension scheme or protecting the Tedang forests, or having a proper housing policy. Things that they can understand. When they mobilize on that, that radicalizes them. Look and see how Chavez did it. Chavez, when he started off, was talking something of Bolivarian, not very left, but basically it's of a nationalistic project, a progressive nationalistic project. So I think we got to ask ourselves these questions, of how we can not only understand, have clear plans, but how we can message this, give a clear message to people who don't read Marx, to people who don't have that background, and to make it relevant to them. Yeah. So this, I think, is for us to address it in our own countries. I think the answers, specific answers, will be different. I think it's important, for what is important for us to understand our reality. We must remember what Marx said. He said, philosophers interpret the world. The point is to change it. And to change it, we need to have a mass movement in this country, a multiracial mass movement. And that's when we can talk about changing the world. Otherwise, all our ideas is just good for the proceedings of the conference, right? I mean, we've got to have this connect from what we think and how we can message it so that it can build that mass movement. So, okay. Yeah, I think ultimately, any socialist group should be talking about taking power. I mean, otherwise, here we are with a lot of good ideas about CPTPP, about pensions, and we're asking the Maladi government to look at it, and we don't even look at it, I think. So I think that's very frustrating, to have all the right answers, you think you have the right good answers, and this guy told, listen to you. It's not going to work, right? If socialists want to do something about changing situations, we've got to think in the longer term of taking power. I mean, it doesn't look it looks like a big dream, right? But anyway, 20 years ago when PSM was formed, this was a big dream to say, can you form a socialist party? No one accepted, you won't survive. Well, you've not only survived, you've grown. Maybe in the 20 years' time, let's see what happens. So hopefully all of us in our ASEAN countries, all of us, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, can move forward on this. Because really, we need to take state power to implement the things we're talking about. So it just can't be having good analysis and advising and critiquing them, because you're not going to listen. It doesn't matter to them. So, okay, I won't take any more time here. Thank you all once again. Let's have a good discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for the opening speech. All right. Dr. Kumar.
Okay, so first of all, before we start our first session, titled Malaysia as a Crossroads, Building a Progressive Third Form, we would first like to invite Dr. Kumar up on the stage to present our souvenirs to our panelists first. Yeah, okay. So can we invite our panelists, Dr. Bridget Welsh, Cikgu Siti, Cikgu Siti Wahyu, and also I will come on the stage here.
Yes.
Can Comrade Nalini please come on the stage too?
Good. Is this international speakers we won't introduce? Moderator will introduce. Then we read the title and then introduce moderator. If you want to do that.
Yeah, I can do that.
And this might pass. You can use this one, just put it there.
I use this.
You want to use it? And then pass. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Okay, we will be starting our first session, which is titled Malaysia at the Crossroads, Building a Progressive Third Form. So Comrade Nalini will be the moderator for this session. Comrade Nalini is a grassroots and human rights activist. She is also a Central Committee member of PSN. Nalini has been actively involved in grassroots and human rights issues since 2003 as an undergrad student. She is also actively involved in grassroots movement concerning workers, the rural poor, and plantation workers. Nalini was the former executive director of Suara, a prominent human rights NGO in Malaysia, and the former secretary of the Abolish ISA movement. Comrade Nalini, the floor is yours. Hello. Hello. Hi. Hi. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, I don't want to be a lecturer or teacher here, so. Okay, thank you very much to the MC for the kind introduction. I think I have a couple of things to do before I introduce the panel and also introduce the topic. Let me just go with some of the things that I was asked to do, some of the reminders which the MC already did just now, but just to emphasize the reminders. Okay, first of all, we would like to have a very good discussion, meaningful and fruitful, but at the same time, very respectful manner as well. You are free to express your opinion and everything. But let's respect each other. It's okay to have a different opinion. It's okay to disagree, but let's be respectful. We have very zero tolerance towards any racist, discriminatory, or any respectful behavior. And then for question and answers later, all the if you have any questions or your feedback, please mention your name before you ask your questions or your feedbacks. But also make it very short, make it very precise, so that everyone will get opportunity to speak. Okay. I think that's all the reminder. Okay, let me just start with introducing the panel today. Okay, our first speaker is Dr. Bridget. Welcome, Dr. Bridget. Hello. She's an honorary research associate with the University of Nottingham, Asia Research Institute Malaysia, based in Kuala Lumpur. She specialized in Southeast Asian politics with a focus on Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore, and Indonesia. She's involved in various projects that reflect a keen interest in democracy and development in Southeast Asia. Welcome, Dr. Bridget. Okay, our second speaker is Saudari Siti Rahayu. Welcome. Don't be nervous. I'll make sure nobody intimidate you here. Okay, Cikgu, so she's known as Cikgu Rahayu, Teacher Rahayu, is the Vice President of Parti Muda, an educator and politician. She was a teacher for 15 years before joining politics. She's the founder of Buku Jalanan Chowki, an NGO that serves an education and resource center for the children of the Chowki area. She contested in the last election in Tanjung Karang constituencies. Her main areas of interest are the rights of children and education access. Welcome. And of course, our final speaker and the well-known Saudara Arul. Saudara Arul is one of the founding members of Parti Socialist Malaysia. He is currently serving as the deputy chairperson. Prior to that, he was the secretary general of the party. He worked as Suara Raya Malaysia. He was my senior, by the way, for over a decade. Still, I couldn't, beat him on that. He was the local councillor for Seminyak constituency for 5 years. In addition to that, he has been active with grassroots organizing and progressive movement, including those who focus on student welfare, workers' rights, oral hustling, and the movement to abolish ISA, which we finally abolished the ISA. Okay. All right then, so let's move on to the topic today. Our topic is Malaysia at the crossroads, building a progressive third force. I think there will be a lot of discussions and inputs from our speakers. I don't want to go into it, but I just want to, some of the questions that we always have when people talk about third force. Basically, what people mean by third force.
What does that mean? Yeah, what is the third force? What we are talking about? Is it ideology? Is it common interest? What are we even talking about? Is it political or is it non-political? When we have two-party system in Malaysia, do we need another third force? And if we need, why we need third force? And what are the experience from the other side of the world that we can learn as well? And I think that's what the speakers today wanted to deal with. And I think we will allow them to do now. So further, let's start the session. The first, I'll pass the floor to Dr. Bridget to share her experience from the South session. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the kind introduction and the kind invitation. It's lovely to be here. Always great to be in the Sino-Chinese Assembly Hall. Sense of history, sense of community. And I was really surprised, but very pleased to be invited to come speak to you. I'm going to wear more of an academic hat because there are lots of activists in the room and lots of Democrats in the room, so I'm sure in the aim to try to offer different balancing options, I will take a more kind of step back perspective. In my slides, what I tried to do in talking about a third force is to draw from lessons of the experience of other countries in Southeast Asia, what are the sort of trends, and then talk and move to some of the conditions and challenges that Malaysia faces. Let me start my conversation with kind of a summary of some of the things I spoke about in Depok and Indonesia last week. There was a conference looking at whether or not democracy in the region is in crisis and what that means. The region I speak about from the perspective of Southeast Asia, but we can generally talk about this from a perspective of the world, right, in the context there. What's interesting is that we now see that elections really matter from a perspective of shaping outcomes. This is, Malaysia has been perhaps the leader in the region that, one or two votes can make a difference, and that has made a difference. And whether or not to have a recount or not in places like Bagan Datuk may make a difference in that context. We've seen also the collapse of many older parties, UMNO being the example in Malaysia, but we see the Democrats, for example, in Thailand. We see Golkar historically in Indonesia. We can see many examples. The other big challenge from democratic practices is that campaigning has shifted. So instead of them being more collective grassroots mobilization, campaignings have become something that's between you and your handphone. It's a more of a kind of a different way of engaging through social media. And the implication of that is that what happens is that the discourse has become much more shallow, right? And they tap into issues associated with emotions, often trying to appeal to irrational patterns. And one of the things I find in my voting patterns is the rise of more irrational voting. And this is a real challenge for a movement that focuses on issues and wanting to be able to engage. And so the discourse and the political literacy is not getting better. It's actually weakening because of the way campaigns are emerging. The third kind of key context I want to talk about is that we also see countries that are democratizing, and I would put Malaysia very much in the region as on that list and really engaging strongly in a lot of democratic practices. Holding this type of conference is an illustration of the democratic space that people are carving. But what we also see is that Malaysia is getting the problems of democracy, high levels of political polarization, significant fragmentation in the society, and many of the political parties, especially those in power, are being delegitimized. So what we saw in Europe is that ideological socialists in the left, they became delegitimized when they went into alliance relationships with the center or with the right. And then as a consequence of that, they lost their political base and the issues lost ground. Right? We can see a similar parallel that's happening with the unity government in some of the parties. I think the DAP in particular faces a major challenge in this regard. So this delegitimation is a very important trajectory. We also see that reformers who said they were reformers are not really reformers when they get into office. And a good example of that is in Thailand. And my diplomacy work. Where we can see Pichai and the different dynamics, but we can see it in other parts of the region. A good example of that, perhaps, is Jokowi in Indonesia, who was elected as a Democrat and then, in many ways, has become very much part of the elite system, especially with the recent deal for his son to become, of all people, Prabowo's vice president's candidates in this area. So we see also what is the troubling part of this is that all the survey research, and one of the hats I wear is the Asia Barometer. We look at different countries in Southeast Asia and surveys. We have now really interesting panel studies. And one of the things we find is that the cohort, the people who are actually supporting non-democratic alternatives, is massive. So it's fascinating. One of my colleagues, academic colleagues, presented on what's happening in the Philippines and how in the Philippines we see a situation where the whole idea of martial law has been whitewashed and changed during the Marcos government. Right? We see a situation where the People's Power movement, which was an anniversary in the Philippines, is no longer an anniversary that's being recognized during the Marcos government, Marcos' son's government. So the societal as well as regime changes really mean that we have these very strong conservative forces. The amount of people that want conservative, one power, return to non-democratic alternatives in many different forms is still very large. And of course, the coalition process. You have a situation now where the business interests and the elites, the oligarchs, instead of working with the military, they now work through parties that are in a coalition. So we have a situation where the system, democracy has become a dynamic where business interests play those games, whether or not it's on tobacco bills or whether or not it's on corporate interests in the West or others. And we can see domestic business, for example, being very powerful in the new coalition in Thailand. So in this context, how can you talk about building a third force, right? These are the kind of contextual realities that we see. What are the different dynamics? And I think it's useful to kind of look at the lessons of recent third force progressive forces, right? The Jokowi, and one could say Bersatu, when it initially formed, and say from 2015 to 2018, could also be couched in some elements of progressive, aka for anti-corruption and others, right? Even though the Malay nationalist narrative is not progressive. But I would say that it became a third force, right? One cannot deny that it managed to gain electorally in significant ways. We've also seen different patterns, right? So one is kind of the embrace of a previous vehicle. What Jokowi did was to latch on to PDIP. Right? What Bersatu did was to latch on to PAS in this context. So this is one strategy, right? You take an existing vehicle and you try to follow that, right? The second strategy, what we see in the region, is to form new parties in this area. And that what we saw, arguably, I would say the most progressive of all of these organizations are form new parties. This is what we saw in Cambodia in 2013, where you had the Cambodia National Rescue Party. And what the Cambodian Party did, the CNRP did, was to focus almost exclusively on land grabbing and land issues and justice issues, which is a very fascinating, and it, that 2013 election, they won, even though the results were not there, right? And they won in a short period of time. And I think, again, I bring to you, kind of taking you out of what you normally talk about is the kind of regional graph. And of course, Future Forward and Move Forward are very interesting. They emerged in Thailand. Future Forward was more conservative compared to Move Forward. But what Move Forward did is that instead of opting to be more co-optive, it began to push the reform agenda even harder. It became more explicitly anti-royalist, it became explicitly more anti-military on the Majesty laws. And it won almost 13 million voters in the last 151 seats. Not the, but what happened in Thailand is that in both CNRP and Move Forward, there didn't come into power. Right? What we saw in Thailand is the emergence of a conservative political force, where we have and Move Forward is now in the opposition, and it is likely to face what CNRP faced in Cambodia, which is that it is now its leaders will be banned, and maybe the party will be banned, and it will have to form and reconfigure in a different way. So what are the things that happen here, right? Well, you can see that all of these particular forces embraced meaningful reform and they engaged with issues of justice as a third force, at least initially. We can also see that there was populism in that context in terms of looking at issues for ordinary peoples, which is wages, concerns about their livelihoods. Livelihoods were very much part of the discourse of many of these political parties, Bersatu being the exception in that context. But you know, look at Jokowi. He was the man of the people, and he still will arguably be one of the most popular Indonesian presidents. And he still has power. He will have power even when he gets out of office. They also became personality process driven by charismatic personalities. CNRP a little bit less so, and Bersatu leaders weren't that charismatic, but they still had the elements of charisma. All of these movements appealed explicitly to young people. And keep in mind, especially Move Forward. But they also embraced gender concepts. So if you look at the way Move Forward moved, although they themselves, some of their leaders, face lots of harassment issues, what we see is a situation where the narrative became inclusionary, not just on class-based, but on issues of other forms of inclusion as well. So it was and CNRP, they focused on the environment. So it's interesting to look at the type of agenda items that we could see that they began to focus on. Especially Move Forward, but also Jokowi in his own way and his campaign used the contemporary technology and social media to their advantage. And this means, you can see they're ahead of the game in that context. And it was not a dynamic of which they drove. Many of their movement drove for them in this process, although they shaped the narratives. So this is some of the interesting aspects. But keep in mind that in all of these countries, Jokowi became part of the elite. All right, Bersatu is part of the elite. CNRP is in jail, and Move Forward faces very serious issues. So even the third forces that we see in Southeast Asia really face significant challenges from business interests, and of course the dynamics of patronage politics, which are these things are tied together in a meaningful way. So what about Malaysia? What about Malaysia in this context? All of you in the room know it better than me in some ways, and I know a different way of looking at it. But I would say, first of all, many of the third forces in Malaysia and many of the political parties in Malaysia come from the same source, and that's UMNO in this context. All right, and we can see that politics still remains personality driven. There is the sense of wanting to build a cult around leaders and put hope in leaders, hope in Anwar, hope in Mahathir, not necessarily delivering on those hopes, but I would say that this is the dynamic because, and it is especially, we could talk about what the reasons for it, the culture, the patronage dynamics, but in terms of merging, right, if we look at Pakatan Harapan, it's almost have its own force in its own way, third force. We could see that was very done from a personality-driven So Malaysia's experience shows that third forces are successful by building coalitions and alliances. That you're not able to do it completely on your own, and there are reasons for that, which I'll come to in a moment. And what we see is reform-oriented agendas, but also conservative nationalist agendas as well as state nationalist agendas. So many of the third forces, say, for example, the Warisan, built on the notion of a state nationalist group in this context. So what's missing from this conversation is the left. And the people in this room who talk to these issues of what has happened to the left in Malaysia. And this is something that's beyond the panel for me from a perspective of time, but that's something to have an interesting question and a discussion, because I think that when you talk about progressive support sources, you also need to talk about the constraints and the dynamics and the cultural dynamics that deal with the left. I just have only 2 more slides. I'm almost done. Don't worry. Okay. So on the conversation about some of the challenges in Malaysia, let's talk with some of the negative things, and then let's talk about some of the positive things from a perspective of the conditions. But we have to start with the reality of racialized politics. These cleavages cut through and prevent a horizontal conversation about class politics in Malaysia. We have to recognize that racialized politics are actually strengthening, not weakening, in Malaysia, and that the fragmentation is also compounded by separatist perceptions and issues in Sabah and Borneo. But also, we have the rise of state nationalism in places like Kedah and this context. So we see a very entrenched dynamic. And the challenge is that there is no multiracialized narrative that is gaining traction from a perspective of and politicians go to race because it's easy, and it also fits the dynamic I was describing earlier of emotional voting, socially. They don't have the alternatives that they can actually deliver in that context. The second important element is that there is a deep-vetted conservatism in Malaysian society. If I compare Malaysia to Thailand, Thailand is a much more liberal place than Malaysia from a perspective of how people respond. Now, this is not to say that Malaysians aren't risk takers and that but if we look at the survey data, we only see around 30% of Malaysia have what I could group broadly as liberal values, supporting rights, supporting tolerance and others. So some of those are on the middle, but at least 40 to 50% have really deeply entrenched conservative values. So this is, and so ideological discussions, the sense of norms and values really have a big challenge from the perspective of this context. It's not just the racialized politics, but they reinforce each other. We also know that the structural situation for elections is very challenging in first past the post systems. What is likely to happen in the next year, in the next 2 years, where you're going to have electoral roll delineation, is that it's going to be even harder for because they're going to increase numbers and they're not going to change the electoral system. And so there will be a sense of a dynamic that really moves. We have a nexus and in very different visions. An Islamist conservative vision for the country is very different than a vision that we see for others. So what are the real opportunities? We have a very dynamic and fluid electorate in election. In Kemaman today, 45% of the electorate are young voters. Right? There's a power of change that is real. And voters increasingly are willing to take on new alternatives. They're willing to throw out governments. Keep in mind that half of the state governments in Malaysia changed in the last few years, as the federal government has changed twice in the last 5 years. Right? So things are fluid and shifting. And despite the conservativeness, we find that values on equality and justice are deeply embedded. Malaysians among the region have very strong views about the importance of equality and justice. Mind you, they have different notions of what that means, but that still is a very important element. So let me finish up on the last slide, because I'm trying, very desperate to keep the time. What are the steps ahead for building a new third force? You need a clear national narrative. That's not evident in that context, right? Number two, you need a movement, as Dr. Jayakumar was saying just a few moments ago. You need, especially among young people in that area, but not only. You need electoral and institutional reform from a perspective of change, especially local elections, which allow the access of new voices and more inclusion, particularly of women within government, but not only, different ideas. And the issues, the Rakyat as a whole are very discouraged or more ambivalent. There's a turning away from politics, especially in the last year. So the issues that matter to them need to connect. And what you may think those issues that matter may not be what matter to them. So to do that, you need to listen more carefully to what they may actually need in this area. And, you know, the social contract of the 1960s and the social contract of the late 50s, you know, these issues are points of very important debate. But ultimately, you will not be able to do it alone. You will need alliance and partners. Those are my comments. Again, I hope I've just hit the time. And I open up as an academic for to turn it over to the practitioners.
Thank you. 19 minutes, 57 seconds. Well done. Okay. It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much for sharing the experiences from other part of the region. I'll hand over to Chigu. Are you? Do you want to go over there? She has her slides. So, do you want to go? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. My name is Rahayu. Yeah. I think the reason my name, there's Cikgu Rahayu in front of that, right? Because I was a teacher before, and then I jumped into politics, and then when I won, oh, thank you. And you know, I ran in GE 15, yeah, GE 15 in Tanjung Karang. And I think the reason why Tanjung Karang, people always ask me why Tanjung Karang. I'm Kedahan, by the way. Why Tanjung Karang? Because we are at that time, we are in the coalitions, and of course the debt seats given to me, it was won by the incumbent for 6 terms, 30 years by No Omar. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, and I want to try. Sadiq's supposed to sit here actually today, and I'm not a good speaker. I don't speak well actually. Sadiq couldn't make it because like it or not, I don't know whether he would like me saying this or not, but I think it's hard for him with the current court case for him, right? So yeah, so I'm here, and I'm so sorry. I can't sit in the I can't sit in his shoes actually, and I don't want to. But now what Dr. Kumar was saying just now resonated with me so much, because right when I was a student, right, I think socialism resonated with me a lot. But then right, I came from a kampong background, and I always think in a form that people in my kampong agree with us. The same when I went to Tanjung Karang, you know, members of Muda and those who came to my election campaign, right, are 2 different sets of people from those in Tanjung Karang. I remember I get this comment from one pakcik from Tanjung Karang. He said to me, Cikgu, tell the people in your war room at that time, right? They call it war room. Just don't sit together, men and women, and they are so, and I was like, oh, okay, I will tell them. But then I think there's two different cultural perspective, that Muda are so different from people there in Tanjung Karang, and we did not understand that as well. And like if we read a lot of political ideologies, for example, right, there are always good political ideologies written down, but does it speak to the masses? Does it speak to the people? Do people believe in us, want to be part of us? Does people see us as 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 them, that I think that's the important thing that we're learning. And in Muda right now, right, we are trying to create our political ideology school. But then we are looking at the framework of I've looked at one type of political school, political literacy classes done by political parties. And I believe that you're not teaching politics. What you are teaching is communications, how to ensure people agree to your idea. I think things about political party in Malaysia is that we always speak to people, talk to people, and teach people to like us, to agree with us. It is not that we are inviting them to want to do this with us. It is like that. It's always the leader and the people, the leader is out there. It's always it is always a hero mentality, like what Bridget was saying. Because right, I remember this moment when I was in Tanjung Karang as well. I drove for a car, and during the election, right, people were saying to me that, oh, Cikgu, let us provide you with a different car. I was like, why? Why is the problem with my car? It's my car, And I want to put like Undilah Rahayu on my car, right? But it doesn't happen like that because they said that your car is just like ordinary people. Malaysian doesn't vote for people ordinary like that. They don't. That I think that's what has been translating in all of the election. We vote those who we thought that our savior. That is what's happening in Malaysia, I think. So to change that conversations, right, I think it's needed a clear political discourse. But right now we did not. I don't know whether PSM have it or not. I believe you guys have it because you guys have a lot of amazing idea. But then would people want to subscribe to our idea? Would people want to sit and listen? Most important is that would people want to be together with us in disseminating and in spreading this discourse the way that we want it to be. And then I think, oh, I need to take my slide. Just oh, is it?
You want someone to
No, this okay. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. I think I went there already. Like in the last election result, right? It's unveiled the pattern of underrepresentations. Like I remember we're having this one conversation that said that political party, right, what we love to do is that we love to move people to the right. That's what we do. And that's what's happening in Malaysia as well. I remember this, we talk about the question of power. And in our Quran itself, right, I happened to come across this one verse that said that, that talks about trial and tribulation of power. And, you know, when I am in politics, I think I experienced that. Power really change you because power can somehow, goes beyond your head, you know. And like for example, right now, we are doing the, we are working on opposing the amendment to citizenship that is going to happen, you know. And this amendment, right, that we were talking about citizenship, we thought that way before, all of our friends who supported us are in the government right now, you know. And there was so much, into this and supporting the things that we want to do. But then, right now, when you're in government, we thought that this is a time for us to get more support, but it doesn't happen. So I was reflecting on the idea of how power can shift people mentality or people principle, and that might happen to all of us too, I think. You know, if we did not really have a direction, or we did not have ideologies that drive us. And I think this is among the reason why, things happen with Muda, for example, right? Why when we go down, people will ask, what is the ideology of Muda? You know, or what are the things that we want to bring to the table? Sometimes, right, I have to be honest about this, that even in Muda, our people who subscribe to Buddha did not understand, what is it that we want to bring forward to the table. It is always about, because I have these one things that really capture, that make me remember, you know, when we want to collaborate with PSM in the last election, right? Everyone in Buddha said that this wouldn't win us an election. People say that because PSM never won. And they say, oh, now Buddha is going to become like PSM, where we are going to be NGO. Person like myself, right, cannot speak at all because I am from NGO background, and people were saying that this is the this is our direction. This is what what will happen to Buddha as well. But I think, right, we are taking a leap of faith, thinking that we need to start. We need to start somewhere. We cannot become a populist party that only collaborated with those who we thought that can win, even though it would somehow, you know, goes against our principle. We don't want to do this. After what happened to us, right, a lot of people were saying that a good way for us to go is to have a collaboration with a winnable party like Perikatan Nasional, like Bersatu. But is it all about winning an election? I understand if we did not win an election, we wouldn't be able to even run a good policy. But then, so that is why I think it is clear that we need a good roadmap to ensure that third force can deliver something. Third force can resonate with the people. That's the most important thing. How are we going to speak to the people that, like for example, if you go to my kampong and then you say, we are from Socialist Party. I believe, right, that the major fragment in my kampong would somehow would ask the first question, diorang sembahyang tak? Do they pray? You know, that would be the first question asked. How are you going to speak to them? You're not going to counter them, you're going to speak to them. How are we going to speak to to people in Malaysia so that people understand that we are we are with them and we are the better option for them. That's the problem I think that we are facing right now. I think even for us, it is very hard for us to understand. Like when Muda started, right? It's Muda. Muda means for youth. People always translated it for youth. But I think we did not manage to capture this segment as well. And I think the biggest things is that we don't speak their language. We don't resonate with them. I tried this yesterday. I was in one of Malay-based social media platform, and I spoke about giving educations to refugee and to the stateless. But I started with Rohingya, and I read all the comment. And even though I read the comment, I also went to see what are the age of these people, right? Most of them are young, and they did not agree to share any resources in this country with others. That is how it is. So I think, right, if let's say I went to another election and then I speak about giving free educations to everyone, regardless of their citizenship, I think I will only get like 50 votes. Yeah. Because the unwillingness of people, I think Malaysians have become more far right because of our politicians. When we go down, we love to speak on the popular sentiments that somehow wins votes. We did not speaks about political literacy. Our political education is always about teaching people how to translate it to votes, how to make sure that they love us and they vote for us. That's that. It's contradicting because I understand that we need their vote in order for us to win. That is why all of our politicians for 60 years, right, play the issue of race, religions, and royalty, right? Because that's a quick win. But do we have politicians in Malaysia who really think that? I'm glad it's 5 minutes. But do we have politicians in Malaysia who really want to serve for the rakyat? But then the rakyat also, but the people also, feel that this resonate with us. It's not an easy task. It's a long way, but we need to really strategically shape our political education, our political literacy based on the cultural aspect of the nation, based on the locality. I think what we're doing right now is that we doesn't touch base with the grassroots. The grassroots did not understand. I look at this type of thing. Like Muda helps during Banjir I think last 2 years. We helped during Banjir, but that's that. So they only see us as someone who helped them, that's that. It wouldn't translate into vote because they did not understand what is it that Muda wanna, or what is it that the politician wanna speak about. They thought that just by receiving aids, these are the savior. So Malaysian politics is about hero politics still, but how to change that, right? How are we going to make sure that people want to accept us, people want to be with us, and people want to do this together with us? That is the question. I think that even in the party itself, we are still looking at the direction on how to ensure that whatever that we want to fight for, the principles that we hold are well sent, are well communicated to the masses. That's the loophole that I think we need to learn more. And I think in creating a third force in Malaysia, all of us need to understand that we need a very, how to say this? I don't know how to word it actually. How are we going to appeal
Our revolution, where Perikatan National came to power, and then after that was, I don't know what to call this mother, okay, because it's the same party, same cabinet, okay, so we had a new, and now we have unity government. That Malaysian politics has always coalition based. Okay, there is no single party, no PSM, no cannot win elections. You have to form a coalition. Okay, the next one I want to go into if you look at coalitions in Malaysia, if you look at the first coalition, the most strongest left-wing coalition will be, of course, the 1947 Putra ANCJA. Okay, Putra ANCJA is, I think, the strongest left-wing coalition in this country. That is way back in 1947. Okay, and the emergency killed this group, the emergency. Sorry, they emerged after but Putra agency was killed by the 1948 emergency. Okay, the left wing. And if you look at the following important coalition of the left is the Socialist Front and the Parti Raya. It's called the Socialist Front. Okay, and this is a social democratic front. And so that means politics. So until 67 was almost class-based because they're fighting the nationalist front. But now you look at the coalitions after that. Then you have the Gagasan Rakyat, which is Semangat 46, BAP, PRM, IPF, PDS. And then a Malay coalition called Angkatan Perpaduan Ummah, PAS. Okay, so now it becomes race and religion, the coalition itself, And then the victory was Kelantan went to PAS. And why this coalition was wiped out is because of the issue of vernacular schools, Merdeka University and all that. So it's because of 3R. 3R, not this one, not rice, rinsing, reward. This 3R is royalty, race, and religion. So that coalition got wiped out. And the following coalition, I'm talking all about opposition coalition, was Barisan Alternative. They call it BA, PAS, BAP, PRM, and Parti Keadilan National at the time, because they haven't joined. The unity factor was Reformasi, fighting Mahathir. And then Kelantan and Terengganu and UMNO lost a lot of seats during that. If you look at the next coalition, is Pakatan Rakyat, PAS, BAP, PKR. During this time, you had the Bersih, you had PRU 13, the opposition won denied 2/3 majority. Okay. So again, this coalition, why did this coalition? See, the earlier coalition broke up because of the Islamic State issue. Islamic State issue, BAP left the coalition. This coalition also because of the issue Hudud. Okay, issue Hudud, they broke up. So every time a coalition, firstly, it is a coalition. Secondly, it is not a left-wing coalition. And thirdly, it collapses always because of race. And then now you have Pakatan Harapan. After that Pakatan Harapan, with Bersatu, DAP, PKR, and Amanah, the main thing was Najib reputancy, the NBN group, okay, and they were ousted by the famous hotel. They changed the hotel name by the way. Capitalists always find a way out. Okay, the next is currently you have Perikatan Nasional. Okay, Perikatan Nasional, interestingly, is mainly a Malay Islamic coalition. Okay, and they are very powerful. Actually, they control 4 states government. Okay, let me now. So if you go again, the initial arguments for national questions, then we went to NEP, restructuring, a lot of arguments, NEP, then institutional reform, during Reformasi time, that was the main argument, institute, Mahathir, autocracy. Now our politics have come to 2 things, lesser of the 2 evils. We talk about today's politics, we always say we vote for them, vote for the lesser of the 2 evils. And these are the current situation of the politics. Okay, going to again, no local election. Just want to go some important things in our electoral system. The Bersih brought some reforms. First past the post system, okay, and party hopping at SD. Because all the, from 2008, state governments and federal government collapses because of party hopping. So now you have a party hopping law, but you can still hope. Okay, they've invented new ways of hoping. And you have this Undi 18 movement. Undi 18 movement is now the, those age 18 can vote. This 18 can vote. This proposal was first requested by AMCJ Putra in the Constitution, 1947 Constitution, not now, but only now it is. Okay, now I go, okay, another very, very important point is our population, this is 2022 census here, 77% of Malaysians stay in urban place, but the amount of seats allocated for urban place is only 21%. Do you see the differences now? That means the population in rural area, 22%, but they constitute 56% of the seats. Okay, so that means you can have all the parties, PSM, Muda, everybody fighting for urban seat, you're not going to win anything. Okay, because there's a notion, because always the fight among the West Coast is fighting winning the, but if you do everything, you only will get 20% of the seat. Okay. Okay, if you look at from the 222 seats, rural seats is 125 seats. So, the rural population is so low, but the seat constitutes 125 seats, urban seats 46, semi-urban 51 seats. So this will give you an idea that any party who wants to be relevant or any movement have to go into the 124 seats. If not, you will keep talking about, So this is one important thing. Another thing is, okay, from this are the seats in that 125 Malay rural seats, 78 Malay seats in Peninsula, Bumi, Sabah, 16, Sarawak, Chinese and mixed seats. Okay, these are just to give you in rural seats. So like Chinese community, maybe they only have 2 seats in a rural area. Well, okay, now you look at Peninsula, 165 seats. After the MA 63, the agreement, it's supposed to be equal seats, all the states, including Singapore. Singapore, you all were part of us short while. So they're supposed all the 4 states, So we are actually talking about 3 countries here. That's why today in Sarawak, you have a prime minister. Malaysia got 2 prime ministers, do you know? The Sarawak prime minister, they've declared as a prime minister because it's 3 countries. But if you look at the seat allocation, so that's why Peninsular parties are very powerful. Okay, they can determine. But today it has changed a bit because of the fighting in Peninsula, because of the differences. You need East Malaysia votes. Okay, finish. Okay, characteristic of the ruling party must be led by 3M. 3M is male, Malay, Muslim. Okay, so that's my second thing is ruling party must be Malay dominant, but needs to have support from Chinese and Indians. So every party which is now comes up as an alternative will always look for Chinese, Indian must have partnership. Coalition partners in East, must have coalition partners in East Malaysia. And if you look at unity government, what you have is a coalition, male Malay Islamic leader, Peninsular base, take care in majority Malay interest, need to have non-Malay support, currently have support in urban Southwest Coast, trying to get Malay support, neoliberal capitalism. If you look at the Perikatan Nasional coalition, led by Malay Islamic leader, Peninsular base, take care of majority Malay interest, need to have non-Malay support. They got Gerakan. Yesterday, I think, MIC, splinter of MIC is forming a new Indian party, will be aligned with Perikatan Nasional. Currently, have support rural North-East Coast, trying to get non-Malay support. Hadi mentioned it in their past thing. Neoliberal capitalism. What's the difference? What's the green wave? So it is actually quite identical if you look at this way, So 3M, So if you look at in Peninsula, I didn't go into Sabah and Sarawak because Sabah and Sarawak always have been supporting whoever wins who wins, they will support them, If you look, you can see that the third force, quite pathetic. But then this is something where we have to build on. Okay, so you can see the unity government, the main opposition, and what we have: PRM, PSM, and MUDA. Okay, now coming to I think I'm already at my second last slide, Nandini. Okay. See, progressive third force. When we talk about progressive third force, I think what we mean is we need a more social democratic Keynesian economic program. It's actually something, this is not something alien, because we look at Tun Razak, the second prime minister, there was a lot of reforms, social security, so EPF was introduced, land reforms and all that. So if to bring back a program of government intervention, people-centric participatory democracy, you have to bring back local government election, must get people involved in the process, because currently there's no democracy. A need class-based affirmative action, we have to go push for a need-based, which I think MUDA is already talking about similar thing. Taxing the rich, okay, I think the one, Anwar also talking about taxing the rich, but not the very rich, but okay. Better social protection, reduce income disparity, addressing climate emergency. See, GLC, Malaysian economy is 40% controlled by the GLC, government linked company. So we come to power, we control 40% of the economy. So how does the 40% run the country? How you use this power, So I think a progressive left, building regional bloc and having a I think the progressive third force, this will be our program, But having program is no use, right? You have to build it. Okay, so coming to my last slide, where the progressive third, where we should invest. And the first thing I think, we have to, of course, build the third force. We have to work with, we have to have serious discussion with other parties, MUDA, PRM, whichever party. We have to first come out with our proper document, proper policy. If not, we will die like all the other coalitions before that. Okay. Second thing, we need to increase women participation in politics, because I think because the 3 male, I think we have to take away 1 M. Okay, and if I think that I think will be a big change, game changer, because Malaysian politics have been always male dominant. Third thing, we have to do big, like Bersih campaign was so much to do with getting your fingerprinted, ink. So we have to do a big campaign to bring back local government elections. Because if local government elections comes, then we can win at the grassroots level. Okay? And proportional election system. This was during 2018, this idea was brought, but it was not. So I think these are the 2 things. Another big movement, electoral reform movement, we have to start and work on this too. Because in the first past the post, we're never going to pass the post. Okay, so we have to work on this. We have to work in Malay, we have to go into the rural areas, okay? And all this while, we cannot always go for build another party, Amana or something, sorry, get somebody, find a coalition partner there and here and then try to go. I think the left itself have to start organizing in rural areas. We have to go to the kampung, we have to go to the Felda area, we go to Felkra, because we have the experience of working with grassroots. Okay, but we have been very urban centered, including parties like MUDA and all that. We have to go into the rural heartland, and if you have to use a country, we have to use a country. Okay. Building movement campaigns on, food security and climate emergency. I think these are very critical things. These are issues which we face every day, climate. And these are the campaigns which we have to take it up, because I think other parties are not really focusing on that. And finally, a big campaign focusing on social benefit. Like currently, PSM is working on the scheme Warga Emas. There's a signature drive outside you can sign, and most of us are going into the aging society. So this is a good thing to invest on, you know. So that is my proposal that we have to work on. So like Che Guevara says, okay, the left will always exist. And Marx says that as long as there's exploitation, the struggle for class struggle is always relevant. And I think as long as things are unequal, we will continue to exist and we will continue to kick ass and we'll continue to fight. And like Che Guevara said, let's be realistic, but let's do the impossible. Thank you.
Thank you. 22 minutes, 5 seconds. Okay, can we switch on the light? Yeah. Okay, let's have our panelists. Yeah. What's on that? All right. We have some time, like 20 minutes. Or 15, 20 minutes? 20 minutes, Brian? Or 15 minutes? 20 minutes, yeah? Okay, we have 20 minutes for question and answer, feedback. Okay, all right. Okay, we already have so many questions. People are like, okay, so I'm gonna go few people first, and then they will answer, and then we will,
One round.
so one round of questions, and then, this is for us? Oh. So I have to pass this, is it? Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, one round of questions and then we'll get the feedback from and then they will wrap up, okay? Okay, first, can I see? Okay, first, second, third. Anyone else? Okay, Sadara, go first.
Yeah, I'm going to stand up. Okay. I'm a doctor, but I'm also an educator. I teach in university before. Okay, I'm very concerned with education, which none of the Malaysian speakers has brought up. Education is so important. Nelson Mandela has said when Mahathir offered him the idea of bring all the black with special rights in everything, he rejected it and said education is the most important thing, that if you don't protect that, the doctors will start to let patients die and the engineer will let bridges fall and all that. Okay? And I think our education is very in shambles. We've been lowering standards so far, so much that we are putting out rotten people. People who doesn't really mark up to what they're supposed to do. Okay, and as a result, I think it's very slowly people. It's not expressed in the public press because it's very embarrassing. And I see it even as a retired doctor. I bring friends to hospital, I act with kids. The wrong thing is done to them, and because the standard are following are failing. Okay, and so I think the party should talk to people on a rational basis that do you want to bring up the education standard for the whole country, or just because it benefits you, because you get scholarships in your community, in the villages, you like to support that, but you're producing a lot of doctors who drop out within 2 weeks of being a doctor, who can't withstand it because they're not interested in being a doctor, and yet you upheld them, give them degrees and so on. Okay, okay. This all I want to say. Bye.
Thank you. You can pass to Gopal.
Thank you, Dr. And thank you to UPSM for organizing this excellent conference, which I think it's a great forum for the left to get together. So my name is Gopal Pamachan. So my question is on apart from education, right? The whole idea of women that Arul mentioned. Can we sort of be specific, or what are your specific strategies that you want to sort of put forward with respect to increasing the number of women in politics? Because I do think of women as an insurgent force to these three ends.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kokila. I'm from Singapore. I have two questions, but I'll keep them really brief. How do you make sense of how, when organizing movement building with, on different campaigns, right? And in that way being in service of the people doesn't translate to votes. Like there is that cognitive dissonance, I think that we've seen with PSM's work and all this. How do we make sense of that? And especially with the proposal that you have around to like focus on serving the people and focusing on building campaigns around the issues. And then my second question is, what do you think is the effect of left politics in the sense of like a strong civil society movement or left party on politics without actually necessarily coming to power? And I'd like to hear Bridget's thoughts on that too. Like how does the left impact politics and the policies of like the mainstream parties without coming to power, and what your observations are on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Saudara over there, and then behind, yeah, after that. Okay,
You know, my observations in being a
so
Malaysian,
your name, Saudara?
Yagaku, organic farmer. I mean, being in Malaysia for some time, I mean, from birth, I've observed that Malaysian scenario, our Islam is not as matured as Middle East. We still retain a lot of the Buddhist elements, and by heart, I think Malays are very Buddhist. And yet our left, our communism or socialism is not as hardcore as Latin America. We see Latin America all are failing. I heard our president saying Chavez, Hugo Chavez, he was a joke in a way. He failed. He's a failure, total failure. And we see in Argentina now, Javier Milei is coming up with anarcho-capitalism. It's a new form of made up socialism. I think anarcho-capitalism is also part of the left. In a way, it's not far right. Because as much as I'm an anarchist myself, I would say that anarchism is part of the left, not or probably it's the merging of the left and right. With our third force, I think for Malaysian case, for our third thing, because as much as we are very religion-based and racial and feudal in that sense, and we cannot be like a Latin American socialism, which we have learned to be a failure. So we have to come up with our own brand of right and left kind of coalition. No? We cannot rely too much on Marxist. We need a new Marxist kind of thing. Probably just get away with Marxism, or probably become Marx ourselves. Think of something new, something very progressive, not rely on the old form of the left and right kind of thing. But I'm not even a middle like Kamala Hassan would say, in the middle part. We don't want the middle part, but we want a merging of the left and right. Somehow we have to come out with a new brand of that. I believe so. Thank you.
Okay, behind.
Hi, my name is Dickens, and my question is, how do we reconcile with the fact that rural populations have very conservative views, as in we are progressive, right? And we have to appeal to that conservatism in a sense that it will try to bring us more to the right, in a sense. And I think that's a hard fact to reconcile because, of course, right, there are views that we cannot sacrifice just for votes. But the thing is, that's what appeals to them. And also, that's what gets the votes. So yet, it's hard to, I guess, reconcile that fact. And especially within our communities, we are, as Richard said, we're very conservative in heart. So mass appeal is something that we lack, and I think conservatism is part and parcel of why we do not get the mass appeal that we should. Since I guess ideas are good, right? Socialism is good ideas, but saying yes, it just doesn't appeal to the issues, I guess, or at least the perceived issues of what rural populations think they have. Race, religion, this and that. So do we have to sacrifice our progressivism just to get votes? That's my question.
Thank you. Over here?
Yeah, hi, yeah. So it's a two-part question, but first I just like.
So your name?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a two-part question. First, before I start my question, I just like to address the doctor, saying that I'm a student who's actually pursuing a master's in educational and developmental psychology. I think it's really, really important that we place a lot of emphasis on education in Malaysia and the focus in understanding how a child develops from a very young age to adulthood. I think it's something that I want to focus on. So take part in that. Don't worry, there are younger generations who are focusing on that as well. Anyways, back to my question. So we talked about conservatism, right, in Malaysia, and I believe some of the panelists have talked about how political parties play on that to garner support from their base, and I think that's a valid point. But at the same time, we see conservative people face or like they have similar issues to us, the socialists, the leftists, whatever, right? They're still worried about their food, they're still worried about their job, they're still worried about all these things. Now, do you think it is because of that strain of conservatism that prevents them from voting leftist politics? Or is it because somehow it's easier for these major political parties to latch on to very populist ideas about race, easy emotional, I guess, rhetoric or words that immediately touches upon a nerve. So I don't think it's just a matter of being conservative, because let's say, for example, we look at a conservative individual in the Deep South in America. They'd be similarly concerned about, their job, their wealth, stuff like that. But at the same time, when you look at these political parties that are winning, like the majority of the votes, they're not touching on, like, oh, we're here to help you, we're doing activism and stuff like that. Because, like what Chiku has mentioned, it's like, I'm just worried about, am I going to get food? Am I going to put food on my table? And I'm going to find things like that. So I don't think it's conservatism. I don't think it's like, oh, you're too progressive. And it's a question that I often think about, right? Are we complicating things too much, or are we like giving them too much theories? Like, oh, we're talking about socialism, we're talking about Marxism, and hey, it's just not about that. And those guys, those main political guys, they market test, they focus group test these ideas, and that is why these ideas take on so quickly. Because I'm from market research myself, I understand how effective these ideas
So
are.
then make it precise.
Sorry, I have ADHD.
Carry on with the second question.
So yeah, that's the first part of my question, right? So the conservative aspect. Next thing, reformism. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that if we want to reform the system within, but at the same time, the panelists have talked about, reformism, these bodies came up on a platform of reformism, and then they eventually get subsumed by the system itself. So is the ideology the main factor, or is it because that you're trying to reform something from the inside and that structure itself is runs on a neoliberal ideology? It makes them, go back on whatever they promised. Yeah, platform. So, like, is reform really the way to go? That's the question. So, first question, conservatism. Second is reform.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Saudara here and then behind them. Go ahead.
Hello.
Make it short and precise here.
Yeah, my name is Tulasi. I just want to say it's a great pleasure to listen to all three panelists today. Thank you for presenting us your ideas. I have three questions for each of you. For Ms. Welch, you did point out that shallow touch points during voting has produced irrational voting. I was just wondering how can we break through this form of irrational voting? Because most people are going to be campaigning on TikTok, so how to break through them? For Chigura Hayu, this has been for a very long question. Why won't Buddha just consider socialism or communism? For Mr. Arun, you did say that one of the elements that we should propose as third force is social democratic Keynesian economics. What elements are you talking about and what do you wish to propose? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Welch, sorry.
Salvia. This was not raised by any of the speakers, but I think it's somebody from people from the floor raised. My question, I think, Bridget Walsh, you wrote something on this, and the other guy I read in the last couple of months is Fauzi Ahmad of USM. The conflation of Islam and the Malay political identity, so that there is a notion of the defense of Islam in relation to the Malay political identity. It creates a confusion because then how does one address it in terms of campaigning? And then in recent years, since the government came to power, nobody can discuss this because of PR. So some of us tried, but we were banned. Many people won't publish any of your articles on that. But I think that is a dangerous point. It has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Oh, okay. Over there.
Thanks so much. My name's Sarah from Socialist Alliance in Australia. I had a question for Hayu. Thank you for being here. I was curious, you've made a comment that people vote for those who they think others say you're not people like them. I'm just curious to hear your take on why that's the case. Certainly in Australia, we're seeing the opposite of people being disillusioned with career politicians and want to vote for the mum or the social worker or people they see are like them. So yeah, interested to understand why that's happening here.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to, if there's no more questions, one more. Okay.
All right.
Okay, there are two more actually. One more.
I don't precise. Okay.
Yeah, please.
My name is Waranvi Patati, and I'm from Socialism Voters Highlight. Glad that to join this conference, and I always admire TSM for their real relationship to the grassroots movement. But I have not really a question, but a discussion and a question at the same time. Right, first, as I listen to the presentation, I had a question that are we really too entrenched into the electoral system? Because as Comrade Arun point out in the slide and the presentation is that there were a period of Malaya agency, right, where every race and nationalities within Malaysia rise up and try to overthrow the government, right? But at the end, they still the party of different races. Yeah. So maybe the question is, where is the real power? Is the parliamentary system hold the real power, or the grassroots movement, or maybe the heart of the economy, or the heart of the production within the country? And the second is that this is the effect and as we know that Marxism, as we know right now, is it really Marxism? Because there was still influence from Stalinism, such as popular front. What is popular front is that in the past, Communist Party has to like make a alliance with the bourgeois parties to win elections, so on and so forth. Is it that this is the influence from Stalinism that we have to treat to the electoral system? But as I discussed with my organization, we do not deny the parliament or electoral system because we saw that as a good platform for political campaign. But we our organization decided that it does not have the full power, such as Bupok Party. And the last one is that, I agree with the comment from Buddha, is that in Thai also, the political school, ideology school does not promote the power from below, such like the relation between some teacher student, but the
Comrade, you have to.
okay, the subordinate and the dominant, right, trying to showing that everything, this is not like this does not it's not productive for the people to think more than the mainstream media.
Thank you, thank you. The final one over there.
Okay, hello. So I'm Irfan. So I just want to ask this question. So with how entrenched race and religion in the mainstream political discourse, so how do we shift this back to ideological base? Because I think if we want a progressive third force to flourish, we need to make sure that we fight based on ideology and we do not stoop down on that level. So that's my question.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give to the panelists to answer so many questions and mostly very general. So I think, so if I'm just gonna start with Dr. Bridget.
Answer one short.
Yeah, so just answer your specific question, but also generally, and then we can wrap up.
All right, just give us the time. All right. On the issue of education, in my presentation, I highlighted the issue of political literacy is something that's very important because, but we all know the education system in Malaysia needs a massive overhaul, not just creating new, but what we've seen so far in the last year is the focus on institution, basically focusing on infrastructure, not necessarily the curriculum. And I think the key component as an educator is to build critical thinking. And I think one of the challenges of the education system is that it doesn't encourage that. And so you have, as well as the fact that you was pointed out, the problems of standards are also doing things. And these are the two real big challenges, I think, from the education dimension. To the question of women, I would say that one has to be careful not to treat women as the same. There are different groups within them. I would also say, second, that if we look at Malaysian voting of women, which I do regularly and I highlight it in my pieces, is that they have been an embrace of more conservative forces and historically. And that doesn't mean, however, that a third force cannot capitalize on gender and women issues. I think what we see, despite the problems of move forwards, harassment of women, and many of them now facing those charges, what they did during the campaign was to highlight sexual harassment cases, the issues associated with feminist power. So there are lots of issues about women that can be embraced, but I think one has to not romanticize the dimensions. And we also are pretty clear that just putting women in office is not enough. It's about the agenda and the issues that are more substantive. For example, Penang's introduction of a gender budgeting element has been an important component to have an implication. So you have to think about different, more meaningful implementation of a gender discussion. A very good question about what is the issue between the gap between with all the service the people do and then the impact of no voting. So it's not just MUDA, for example, when DAP went to Sarawak and had all their plans and no votes came out. The answer to this becomes, I think, there are two pivotal dimensions. You know, people in poverty need the government. They need the winners to be in office. And so they vote for the winning side, who they think are going to be the winners. Because the government plays such a dominant role in Malaysians' life, and especially when you're in points of insecurity. Even if the fact that it's not making enough difference, the fact is that it is the driver. And what distinguishes Malaysia from some other countries in the region and the world is that the government plays such the focal point in this area. And also, you know, you have to understand that people's notions of insecurity are very different. So what you think is helping people is actually a very different notion from people of what they see. They see help as an entitlement or a need in a different way. They don't see that they don't see that you should be giving a reciprocity relationship back in that context. So it's this is where the rethinking and the re-understanding is very crucial. On the issues of the left, there are two sets of questions that came here. I think, you know, people in this room know much better than me, but the leftist brand in Malaysia is demonized in large parts of Malaysian society. And I think those of you who are on the left need to be conscious of how you are phrased and branded, because I think this goes back to the emergency period, and there is a constant pattern in Malaysian politics of otherizing an enemy, and the left is the easier enemy in this context. And I think, you know, you see how PSM gets used racialized labeling or others, right? These things are deeply rooted, so it's hard to break out of these patterns. What can the left do that's outside of electoral politics? I think the left in Malaysia is already playing and continues to play a major agenda setting role on the issues that are being discussed in political life, especially as the conversation becomes more shallow. The importance of agenda setting, meaningful substantive issues takes on more salience. It also serves as an important conscience raiser. So as people get co-opted into the system, then the left can actually raise the power of principles, and those things can never be forgotten. But also, as an outside force, you can also be a facilitator of new partnerships, especially those from the perspective of engaging different parts of civil society. Aru's excellent presentation. There's one area that I have very strong disagreement, and that is how he classifies this rural seat. So if you take an average seat like Tanjung Kanang, people would call that a rural seat, but there are urban parts within it, and then there are semi-urban parts within it. And so this is when you're at the local level. And so to think about this time as a rural-urban divide, what is really rural and what has really changed. But what is interesting is that the change in Malaysian politics in the last 5 years has taken a lot. It's not been as much in the urban areas, it has been in the rural areas. And this is where Aru and I perhaps agree, in that we see the shift among Felda voters, the shift among voters in parts of Sabah and Sarawak and more rural areas and communities, the rise of dietism, for example, in Sarawak. So what does this mean? I think there are meaningful, very critical rural issues that many people don't acknowledge. The issue of land, the issue of assets and how people have lost their assets, the social mobility, the infrastructure. These are things that become very important. And I think that I would say that it really does have a mindset change to engage. Let me just see if there's one more question that I can answer in the 30 seconds I have left. In terms of the irrational voting question, which was directed towards me, I would say you have to be equally irrational in how you phrase it. You have to have the emotional appeal. Right? You know, all major, you have to tap into emotions. You know, right, as opposed, it's interesting being on the left, you try to focus on class and financial interests, but you don't necessarily couch that within the context of the holistic human experience. And that means adopting social media in a mechanism from below in a meaningful way. Right now, many of the issues on the left are seen as compartmentalized and financial based, as opposed to tapping into things that are more connected to the soul. Right.
Thank you. Are you?
I really want to answer the first question on why is it Muda did not adopt communism and everything, right? At the moment, right, we are rebranding. I don't know whether I can say this or not, but then we are rebranding ourselves. And because before this, we did not adopt any ideology. We go with 5 principles, Muda, something like that, right? But yeah, we're changing colors and everything, but yeah, I think it will come in January something. Yeah, let us wait for that, right? The basic is similar, I think, but then I really want to go to the idea of I want to bring you guys back to my kampung. Yeah, my kampung is really two-party system. One is Barisan Nasional, UMNO is always there, and also PAS. You know, they don't even share the same mosque for prayer because it's two different things for them, right? So that is how very embedded the idea of religion, race in my kampung. I have a question. This is always a question for Muda and also PSM and for everyone in the third force, right? Are we there with them? Are we there speaking to them? Are we there part of the society in the rural area? You know, like UMNO, right? They speak the language. They speak the language of everyone in my kampung. They are the savior. Like for example, I remember when I first because my dad is only paddy farmer, right? I remember when I want to go to university, the first time that I want to go to university, I think my dad need 1,000 ringgit from Kedah to Kuala Lumpur to send me here to study and everything, right? The first person that he went to is, of course, the UMNO person there who have the money to lend to them. You know, they always the political person in the rural area, right, is always the contact point of everyone there. I mean, do we have the ability to do that? You know, to just be with them, to listen to them and everything. I remember this one particular words from my mother. You know, every time there's Hari Raya Haji, right, Korban, right? So I remember, kita dah kalah ni, BN dah kalah. So that's why in masjid we only got one lembu, one cow to sacrifice. You know, when UMNO was in power, we get 6 cow for us to sacrifice. Simple things as that. You know, people in kampung did not talk about ideology or not. They talk about who is there with them. You know, so that is why I resonate with what you say, Dr. Bridget, on does we touch the emotion of the people? I mean, do we make them feel that we are always there for them? That without us, right, they cannot live. So that is what politicians do to people in kampung. Feudalism is always there. Where I'm going to your questions about how people see our politicians as the savior. I just run one town hall on child protections. The problem with that town hall, I think, is that we invited politicians to come. It's a problem because we need to change everything of our itinerary, because the politicians need to come early and then the politicians have to go back. They don't even listen to how to do children protections, but we need them. We saw only by them being there, right? People will listen to us. So we always believe that people in power are the savior who can change things. You know, even in Muda, I have these kind of conversations that say, oh, when I send to the group about this is for to our grassroots about the amendment that I was saying on the citizenship things, right? What they replied to me was really shocking, because they said to me like, Cikgu, that's why you need to win election so you can change policy. See what we are doing right now. We didn't win. Our voice is not heard. That's why we need to choose a coalitions that win. You know, because somehow it doesn't translate it. Our people see that those who hold the power are those who can help them, who can help move things, who can help change. Okay, 1 minute. So I think to answer you, right, Malaysian people are still feudalistic in nature. If we talk about the Malay, right, we are trained in the culture that we respect our adults, those senior with us, those who hold power. So that's how I think things need to be changed. We need to be with the people. We need to be inside the people. We need to speak with the people every day. We need to be in their daily life actually in order for us to change. I really want to answer about women as well. In the last election, Muda fielded 50% of women's running in our PRN. One of our candidates is here, Tanusha, is at the back. But it was really hard. It was really hard. It was really hard because people, I remember this one words as well. This is another class base, because we bullied capable men just to give room to women. That is among the same. Seriously, it came out and I was really shocked. I was like, wow. If we talk about class base, right, I think women are being really oppressed still, or still put in the lowest rank still, especially in Malaysian context. I do believe some of our candidate, right, that was placed is because of the quota that is placed there. You just need to have women. So women are not given equal room, equal space in our political system due to our cultural element as well. Like you know, for Malay, men are always the leader, and among the Muslim, men is always the imam. You know, those who can lead prayers. So that is actually contextualized into the leadership system as well. And I think that's need to move away from the system, because whatever it is, women deserve equal chances, because women is never a token, but we also a strong voice in making decision, and Muda is and women is always a leader, and Muda supports women in leadership. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, questions. Okay, on the question of education, I think one thing which the late Raja Kumar spoke to me, he told me one very important thing. If we can make our public education school very high standard and very inclusive, everybody will go to the public schools. But today, people are going to private schools, and then we are fighting over other things. So I think one very important thing is to invest on the public education, make it class 1 education, so that the mass will go to the public school. That on the question of education. On the question of women, see, Gopal, this is very, very good question, because our own experience in PSM, all our grassroots struggles. If the grassroots struggles are successful, because there are women leadership, very clearly. If there's corruption, there's male. So this are very, not to romanticize women, for those men, all that, but even saying all that, but I think it is very, very important that, women grassroots leadership, this women, to take up important roles in the party. In our central committee, we have 50% more women participation, but for elections and all that, we fail miserably compared to Madam. So there's something we can learn from Madam. Okay. On the question of votes, okay, the thing is, we stand in election, we know we're going to lose because of the structural issues of the two-party system and all that, you know. And to prove that, when Mahathir stood as independent, he lost his deposit. So he and me saying that. Only thing, he is two-time prime minister. He built Langkawi, he lost deposit. Although not prime minister, still lost deposit. So the question is, you cannot win election in the existing system. But again, then why do you participate in election? Okay, you have to, what Marx, Engels, all these people have said, you have to be what the majority of the people believe. You have to be there. You cannot be in isolation attacking elections. You know, you have to be there, you have to be steady. Most journalists love PSN because we're the only person who talk something different. We have to show our ideas. Okay, because you completely don't stand in election, they say, why you are the NGO? Why you have a political party? We have to stand in election. Also, the comrade in Thailand, whether election, revolutionary part or elect, all that is okay. But the mass, to be open to revolutionary, the masses said we need a revolution, it will happen, isn't it? So you don't have to plan all those things. The thing is, we have to invest our time on building the movement. And then we see, you know, but here, the last comrade talked about race and religion. That is the biggest stumbling form. We have to address that, okay? Civil society or political parties, I think both are equally important, but the civil society movement in Malaysia is very urban-centric, for example. You know, it is just KL based. Okay, you bring everybody to KL and you call it a national movement. It's very different than the Hartal in 1947, which is very nationwide, you know. So you need to build, what PSN is trying to see is a Marhai movement where we have workers, contract workers, farmers, plantation workers, urban poor communities. Now we are trying to build a movement of the people, not just because most civil society movements are either foreign funded, they have 3 or 4 people in the organization getting money and very good in social media, but they don't have the masses with them. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, so you need a social movement must be mass based. If not, it is just it lives as long as the funding comes. Okay. On Yogapu, I think Hugo Chavez is a real revolutionary leader. I think we fully, I think the whole of Latin America has changed because of people like Chavez. And I think we have to learn from Latin America. Because there you have the whole movement fighting US hegemony and all that. Of course, sitting here we can like Chavez, but you know what Chavez did to the world is very significant. Almost the whole of Latin America, all this while under American rule, has changed because of ideas of people, of revolutionary process. Okay, on the question on rural votes, you see the whole idea about rural votes. I think 1 minute. Okay, that on rural votes, I think the whole question is you have to be part of you have to go into the rural areas. Okay, you have to go in, you have to go, you work on the ground, and you have to build, you have to bring changes within the system, you know. And I think reformation, and all that, this is all we call it a dialectical process. You know, reformation is nothing wrong. But how does reformation move to the different levels, you know? So you need reforms. Every struggle is an important struggle. We have to invest time in it, and we have to get involved. You know, the Marx says that the prevailing thoughts in the minds of the masses is the ideas of the ruling class. That means today people are against Rohingyas or very right wing. It's because the ruling class is right wing. Okay, so the prevailing ideas of the mass is the ideas of the ruling classes. They form the dominant idea. So if you don't attack the dominant idea, you don't bring socialism, you know, you cannot move to the right. You know, you have to, the strength of PSN is to stay in the left and stay fighting in the left to make sure people there move beside. That is our strength. Because if not, a lot of people have gone right, including PKR. PKR is a party, Syed Hussein and all that. They merged with Parti Keadilan. They wanted to move, they had the two red lines in Keadilan, right, in their flag, which is mean their sideline, right? What has happened is they're supposed to go and bring the movement to the left. No, they go to the right. So I think that is where we have to be careful when we, you know, to stand, not to be too, don't get, when you want to change, don't change, don't change yourself to bring change, you know. You have to make sure changes happens through a process of work. The question on, okay, this division and all that. Okay, this thing about what I meant was, you see, state intervention, the role of the state, you know, under neoliberal capitalism, what has happened is everything is privatized. Everything is going to privatization, you know. So we have to bring it back. And that is the thing which people can understand. Okay, you need, during COVID, we know how much the state played. All of us were saved because of state intervention during COVID. Hospitals, government hospitals suddenly was so important during COVID. So it's important to use this issues to, that's what I meant by structuring the economy. That is GLC playing a more important role in reforms. Electoral system and parliamentary system, yeah. So, and finally, I think the, time's up. Saved by the, okay, I think the biggest issue is the question of race and religion. Okay, the question is, you have to break this. And a lot of talk, there's one question about rural votes, right? But the question is, a lot of rural people, voters actually stay in urban areas, they go back and vote and all that. But there's a whole question of insecurity. There's an insecurity among the Malays, but this insecurity is not being addressed. So what a lot of non-Malays think about the Malays are, whatever they bring is hopeless. They are, you know, they are conservative, they don't know, you know. Something which what Shinwat recently spoke about. You have to understand why they think like that, not just push it aside. So in that sense, I think a party like PSN and Muda and other, the progressive have to go to the ground, have to bring changes within that circle, you know. And through economical upliftment, we think we can find, end of the day, the question of food and butter is the main issue. Food and butter is very important. Just one last one. Yeah. I did a study, all the cleaners, about 100 over cleaners, majority Malays, about 80% Malays. I asked them what is their biggest issue? Salary, work security, these are the main issues. But in the media, social media, the bigger issue is Zakir Naik, concert, you know. So there is totally, so the question is to bring the dominant argument of economic struggle to the ground to fight cultural hegemony. I think that's the only way. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your participation. Thanks to the panelists once again. Thank you so much for your input. And I think I couldn't ask questions because I'm sitting here as a moderator, but I just want to summarize some of the things that I reflected throughout the discussion. Is like, if we talk about third force, we are talking about a third force that is progressive. We can define the progressive later, but it has to be something different from the ruling class. It has to be something totally different. It has to be ideological. It has to be tactical, but it also has to be political. So, you know, that's my reflection. But it also, what Bridget was saying, that it has to be very honest
assessment of the ground, assessment of the context, and we have to be honest with what we want to do when we talk about third force, what we want to build, what are the agenda, what is the program that we want to have for the people. And I also think finally, the message across was like, you cannot walk alone when it's come to third force. It has to be coalition, it has to be partnership, it has to be with so many people who are like-minded to build this force together. And finally, it has to be to the people, and people has to be with us. Okay, and thank you very much. And that's all. I leave it to the MC now